أكتم من الآن والأبد آمين.
مين تحب نبتدي بنا؟
اتفضلي.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm happy to be here with you and happy to be here with you, even though we had to reschedule once or twice. For today, we're going to talk about nurturing the soul, specifically focusing on pre-adolescence, understanding where they are in their lives, what are milestones of being pre-adolescents, what their mind is going through, the struggles that they face, and in keeping those in mind, how to best approach them when thinking through their service. So first off is, I talk through the objectives. First off is, what is a pre-adolescent? So pre-adolescents fall into the ages anywhere between the developmental stage of somewhere between childhood and teenage years, anywhere between the ages of 9 to 12 years old, depending on their level of development. Maybe it starts a little bit sooner, maybe it starts a little bit later, but it's before those teenage years where they, are concluding elementary school, going into middle school before they started high school. And in this crucial stage for them, they're going through physical changes, they're growing, rapid growth spurts, they experience hormonal changes, they begin to show signs of puberty, and then they go through cognitive development pieces where you have, they're increasing in their independence, their decision making, and they're still obviously very heavily dependent on the adults in their lives, but maybe with a little bit more of their own opinion and spin on things as they continue to grow. And then they're going through emotional challenges. They're grappling with heightened emotions and mood swings, partly due to the hormonal changes, partly due to, their surroundings, and a growing sense of self-identity. And then you have their social dynamics within their peers. This is the part of their life where they're looking for a sense of belonging. They're contextualizing where they stand in social rankings compared to others. And less they're placing less importance on their parents' opinion of them and more importance on their peers' opinion of them. And that's interesting because it starts changing their decision-making skills. And I have that little excerpt on the left-hand side that says, parents, if you ever need a reminder about the power of peer pressure, my 13-year-old son went from never eating vegetables to now eating literal dried seaweed because a friend told him that all the seaweed would help grow a mustache. It's a little bit of a joke, but it's a little bit also of reality, is that the influence of friends takes a larger and larger role in their lives as they continue to grow. And I touched on this a little bit. So as part of their identity formation, they really do start to have a stronger sense of who they are, what their interests are, what their likes and dislikes are, what their talents are. And then they start building around themselves what their values are. That's an important one that we're going to come back to. And then their academic challenges as they're transitioning from elementary school to middle school, and I'm sure you guys remember, you're looking less and less, prescribed amount of assignments coming from your teacher, and the level of complexity of navigating their, academic or their schooling ends up increasing. And so there's more for them to do. There's more classes for them to tackle. There's more complex topics for them to be able to understand and grapple with. The assignments and standardized testing, and all of that starts to hit them in the middle school years. In their peer relationships, we touched on that. They have really, closer friendships, unique social circles. It's the time when, if cliques are going to start to form, this is the age where they start to form, because they're seeking acceptance and commonality and belonging somewhere, seeking validation from their peers. And here you have the beginnings of, moral and ethical development. They grapple with questions of right and wrong. Where do I fit? What do I behave? Where does my faith fit into the larger picture of who I'm becoming, of who my friends are, of how I want to express myself and my identity? And they seek to understand their place in their larger framework of life in that way, in societal norms. And then here you have also spiritual exploration. As they become more cognitively aware, cognitively capable, they start asking interesting questions of their own faith, right? Questions of their belief, their level of engagement in their spiritual understanding begins to mature, and they start asking questions or needing answers to, some of life's more difficult questions. And so it's really interesting because, at face value, maybe some pre-adolescence you would just call a kid, but really they're going through really interesting period of their life where they're maturing and growing faster than they know what to do with. And it's critical as servants, as guides, as examples for them that we keep that in mind and treat them accordingly. So what does that mean for us? What kind of things should we continue to stress with them? So you have really becomes really important for them is questions or answers around what the love of God means in their life. This helps for identity formation. These are lessons and topics around who I am in God's eyes, who I'm called to be, how I'm called to live my life, what I find my value in, why God has placed such a high value in me, and that identity formation to be God-centered and God-oriented becomes critical, because otherwise you leave that topic open for the world to define. And, I think it goes without saying, but the risk there is that they start placing their identity or their value in the worldly, and how good they are at something, and how much they have of something, and who their friends might be, and whether or not they are able to do something or not, whether it be academic or social or whatever it is, right? And so it's really important that they're grounded in the truth that the love of God is first and foremost. Their relationship with God should be first and foremost. And if they're centered in that, then you can gear their identity formation piece of their development in a healthy path. That way you're not so easily strayed by the happenings and the circumstances that are around you. The next one is lessons around the life and teachings of Jesus Christ, especially as they're starting to explore topics of moral and ethical development. This is probably the part of their life they're going to be bombarded with the world's interpretation of what good looks like, or the world's interpretation of how sometimes things can be relative, and that's the world's take. The other perspective on that is, the godly perspective, the Christian perspective is that there is a right and a wrong. There is teachings to which we hold ourselves to be the standard. And again, in that way, if you can ground them in the, in that firm line in the ground, then that way their moral and ethical development is set on a good solid foundation, especially as they're going to continue to age and grow and mature and be challenged and be put in social situations where, they're going to be tested, they're going to be tried, they're going to be put in circumstances where they have to make a decision between what do I do here? And if you can give them a firm foundation in what the teachings of Christ are, and combined with obviously with the love of God and their identity formation, you put them as more likely to make better decisions. And then here also, the next one I wanted to expand on is the importance of prayer and worship. And these kinds of lessons are super important because as they're growing, their connection with God also has to continue to grow and mature. Sometimes we can get caught up, or you might have observed, is that, as we grow, the language of our prayer also should grow. Our relationship with God should continue to mature. So, I have really little kids and their prayers are sweet and simple. And it's about, their day at school, or, the snack they want later, or, the, friend's house they want to be able to go to. And it's prayers that are appropriate for their understanding and their scope of the world. And as we mature and grow in our spiritual, in our spiritual path, you need the foundation of prayer, foundation of worship, but it should continue to grow in complexity and depth. And so my prayers, have to be centered around thanksgiving. They have to be centered around gratefulness. They have to be centered around you know, growing in asking and seeking for understanding in your paths in your life. Not just about the candy that my kids want, but the future that you're looking forward to. God help me make good choices with, amongst my peer group, amongst my friends, especially as that relationship standard changes. And so you have to guide their spiritual exploration again towards something, because if you don't guide them towards something, they will end up pulled towards something else, maybe unknowingly or unwittingly. And then the other one that I really want to stress is the role of the church community. I'm sure you know in your own lives the benefit of a healthy, common-minded friend group, and the strength that comes with being selective with whom you surround yourselves with. And the church is a really good place to build and to reinforce that sense of community amongst kids of this age group, because in reality, if their peer relationships at church are strong, and the examples they see in church relationships are strong, and the church community are strong, again, it makes them less susceptible to be swayed. There's a saying that goes, tell me who your friends are, and I'll tell you who you are. By who you choose to keep company with, makes you more susceptible to behave in a way that is more similar to that friend group. So that's the first aspect of it, is establishing healthy peer relationships through the church community. But not only that, but then also through the church community, you also gain healthy role models as well. Healthy role models in seeing people who are like-minded, who are maybe a couple years ahead of you, that are in different life stages, and you can model, the good that you see in them in your own life and practice that in your own life. And so those are just a couple of call outs, is in keeping in mind where they are in their life stage. Really important pieces to weave into the lessons that we teach them and in our interactions with them, keeping in mind that the development changes that they're going through. So in those lessons, what do they look like? Knowing, as they might have some sensitivities to their emotions, sensitivities to their cognitive development level, sensitivities to maybe being a little bit dismissive to the adults in their life. I would encourage that, to have effective communication and a high level of engagement from pre-adolescence, is to encourage active listening. Hear them out, see where they're coming from, see what their perspective is, give them a place where they can express their questions, and be encouraged to ask and have critical thinking. So that active listening means you're not just sitting there nodding and you're just going to dismiss whatever they say, but active listening is really hearing where they're coming from, listening from their perspective, and looking to contribute to a conversation with them. And really, you can only do that if you have the right proper amount of empathy and understanding for them. And I'm hoping that, when we cover understanding, what their developmental needs are, you can be more empathetic to the turmoil they might be in, the uncertainty that they might be in, the high amount of energy they might express. Middle schoolers tend to be a little bit rowdy. And so if you can understand where they're coming from, you can probably be more effective in challenging or channeling that in a more effective way. And always be respectful to each of their individual experiences and perspectives. Some of them may have different home situations. Some of them may have different peer situations. Some of them may be on different places in their, academic levels. Whatever it is, and whatever your message is, you have to be very specific and intentional with each individual and what their needs might be. And you can only do that if you know each individual and understanding their perspective, understanding why they might have a different lens on life than the rest of the class. And in teaching them, like, what does a good lesson look like? Knowing what we know about pre-adolescence, storytelling, sharing stories from your perspective or stories of the saints, parables from the Bible, having them be able to place themselves within the story and think through, how do I if it was me, how would I handle this situation? Visual aids, multimedia resources. It's a very tech capable group. Sometimes you have to speak their language and know what their latest and greatest trends are. So whatever it is that you might be able to connect with them on some level, that they understand that you're not some other, that you can understand where they're coming from and that you can speak in the same language that they speak. And knowing that they have high energy and they're, prone to outbursts or whatever, if you can channel that energy into hands-on activities, some experiential learning, whatever it is, something to make the lesson more tangible for them. What does this look like? To this day, as old or as young as you want to say that I am, but I remember a lesson that I had in middle school, for example, and the lesson was about the chapter in James that speaks about the untamable tongue. And I had a teacher have us start the lesson with an exercise in taking a toothpaste tube. And there's two of us in the class that did this exercise. And the challenge was who could empty the toothpaste tube the fastest. And so we would go and we did that. We squeezed everything out and we made a big mess. And she goes, okay, now put it all back in. And it was to show and it was to illustrate the point that, sometimes we speak faster than we think, but it's very hard to undo the damage that the tongue can do once it's out there in the wild. And it was a lesson about teaching the wisdom in, what you say matters, and the damage that it can do. Even if you say sorry, sometimes that damage can't be undone. I still remember that, like, I was covered in toothpaste, and I'll always tie it to that lesson because it struck me as a very tangible way to understand that, when something's out, it's not always easy to put it back in. Things like that, lessons like that will stay with them. And I say that from my own personal experience, and I'm sure, and I hope that you guys have, similar experience in your lives of like lessons that really, really struck a chord with you. For me, they tended to be the lessons that had like a interactive component to it. While I was wiping toothpaste off my hands, I was really listening to the lesson because I was so focused on this makes perfect sense. So those are some thoughts or some recommendations there. And then in general, how is it that we can continue to nurture their spiritual growth on an ongoing basis? Encourage them to have their personal prayers and time of reflection. In a period in their life where lots of things are changing, the best way to encourage them to continue to progress is to ask them to remain grounded. And the way you remain grounded, and the world calls it meditation, or the world will call like little pieces of it. They'll take pieces of personal prayer and reflection and like godly concepts and make them generic, or they'll say maybe you should just do 10 minutes of whatever quiet time in the morning, or meditation, or yoga, or all of these things that are kind of shadows or pieces of the puzzle, but they're not the whole thing. And so in reality, is like that concept comes from the power of what it means to just sit with God, is to reflect on your day, reflect on your behavior, reflect on God's goodness in your life, taking the opportunity to be intentional with your behavior, intentional with your relationships, intentional with what it is that you're trying to accomplish, instead of just kind of ping-ponging and pinballing through your day and through your life and through your relationships. So encourage them to have that focus when the world would otherwise not encourage them to have that amount of focus. And also, give them opportunities for service and outreach. We just finished saying about how energetic this group is and how drawn they are to peer groups. Give them a place to hone in that energy and to have healthy interactions with one another. And also it gets them out of this self-identity and self-seeking behavior that middle schoolers, they can kind of like pull in on themselves and really make the world all about them. Service is a really good way to open them back up. It's to show them that the world is more than, just what they need or just what they want, that there's others to care for, that there's others to love for. And then another one is facilitating mentorship and peer support within the church community. you know, these are things that you do outside of the lessons. These are things that you do to continue to foster healthier relationships with them and set them on their journey to have their own healthy individual relationship with the church and with the community. Is to really ground them is that like, no, this is what we do on Friday nights. So this is where I am on Saturday nights. This is part of who I am. This is where I find my comfort. This is, you know, you set them in their like their basic foundational of just like, no, this is what I do, and be comfortable in saying that to their friends, like, no, I'm not skipping Sunday, I've got service. You know, and for the first few times they don't know why they're going, and then it becomes part of their practice and it becomes part of who they are, and it becomes part of their life, is that like, no, this is what we do because we don't just do it to do it, we do it because um you know, we have to be part of the one body together. We have to serve one another. We do that because that's how we express, you know, the love of God towards one another on a daily basis. It's where I get refilled for my week. It's how I go through my challenges, is continuing to be centered and to be grounded in the church and the community and in communion with one another. And I think that covers everything. So in reality, you know, and I think this goes for all age groups, you know, all children, all students, every class that you serve has to feel that they're part of a safe, nurturing environment. They have to be physically comfortable, they have to be emotionally comfortable in order to be able to successfully learn. And you have to build that environment for them. And students learn best when they're actively engaged in the learning process. So some of those demos, explanations, those things that I was alluding to, search online. There's plenty of things that you can do to make your lessons a little bit more interactive. And then also consider that each child is valued as an individual. They have unique physical needs, social needs, emotional needs, intellectual needs. And you can only know what those needs are is if you invest time with them. And their student self-esteem is enhanced by positive relationships and mutual respect among students and servants. And I say that because, you know, sometimes it's easy to write off the difficult kid in class that's disruptive. Or sometimes it's easy to dismiss, you know, when someone is giving you a hard time and saying, oh, I don't even know why I bother them. They're just a disruption. It's a waste of time. I don't even know why they come to church. Those are the kids that need it the most. The kids who come but act out, them acting out is a call for attention. There's a cry for attention. That means they're hurting. They're hurting in some other way in their life. And they're feeling safe enough to express it to you, believe it or not. And so you're someone in their life that I think can have the opportunity to change. And then you yourselves, in everything that you do, you have to be a role model. Inside the church, outside the church, in your school, in your friend groups, in your interactions, in your social media, whatever it is, you have to walk the walk. It's not negotiable, right? You can't be in class teaching one thing and living your life in a completely different way, because I guarantee you 100% of the time, they're going to pick up that hypocrisy and they're going to write you off. No word that you say will echo, no lesson that you give will land, regardless of how good it might be, no matter how true it might be. You, as the vehicle to the message, become discredited if you don't live the life that you're preaching. Yes, people make mistakes. Yes, everybody, you know, has their imperfections, but I would say to the extent of your ability, to whatever you can control, and to whatever you can own as a mistake, you do that. You say, I made a mistake, or I shouldn't have done that, or whatever it is. You have to live your life in a way that your lesson and that your life are congruent things, that they match up, that they line up in the same path, or else you end up with this mismatch, and the thing they're going to dismiss is going to be the whole thing. You and the lesson get thrown out the window. So those are just, that one's maybe more general, not specific to pre-adolescence. And that is all I had for today. So what questions might you guys have on pre-adolescence or that specific age group?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Please. If you have a question, please feel free.
Oh, I don't have a question.
Or if you want to type it in the chat, I'll take it there too. Up to you guys. You changed your mind, Jesse?
Oh, I didn't have a question.
Oh, okay. I thought you said you did. My mistake. Sabuna, is there anything you wanted to add?
الله يخليكي تعيشي. شكرا كتير ماري، وربنا يعوضك وتذكرينا في صلواتك.
I'll pray for me, Abuna. And I can send you these slides too, so you can share it with them and anybody else who might not have been able to make it today.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.